Welcome
This is an awesome podcast. This is one of my favorite ones.
to the Jeff
That's a lot of whiskey, Jeff.
Macolino
Jeff Macolino
Podcast. All right, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry, looking at my computer. Second episode of 2026. Trigger warning on this one. No pun intended. With this guest, we talk a lot about mental health, including suicide. So if that kind of thing is jarring to you, I know that even the word people try not to say on YouTube, but I don't care so much because it's a real thing. I don't think censoring it is there's much point in it. So if that sort of thing is sensitive to you, don't watch this episode or listen to this episode. But there's some important mental health stuff. Now, I recorded this episode back in October. It's Sunday morning. That's why I'm drinking water. I know that's great audio, isn't it? I recorded this episode back in October, I believe. I think so. Trying to remember. It was a while ago. But I think it's still relevant. I don't think anything, the mental health stuff's important. There's a BetterHelp thing in the show notes that you can click on, and I'll get money if you sign up for them. Just throwing that out there. If you need help, seek help. And I do think it's important to, again, I've talked about it many times, and that's honestly helped shore up my safety net. So I do think it's important to have people in your life who you can talk to, and really seek those people out. You can find them on the internet if you if you don't have them in your life. I know I'm lucky. I've lived in St. Petersburg my whole life, so I have 1,000 people in town that I know. But if you don't have that situation, seek them out. I don't think it's that hard to find someone who you can. I think sometimes people need companionship. It's a weird thing with I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm an idiot. I think I'll just let the episode do the talking. And Zach Tidwell is the guest, and he is blind, and he's deaf in one ear, I believe, from his suicide attempt. So we get into it, and I can't say I hope you enjoyed this episode, because I hope you get something out of this episode. That's probably a better way to say it, because it's not the most lighthearted episode of all time. But hey, it's real life. So what are you going to do? So again, sit back, relax, and enjoy, ? All right, everybody. I'm very pleased to welcome Zach Tidwell to the Jeff Macolino Podcast. Zach, how are you today?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. It's this is today has unraveled in a way that I did not expect, and I feel like it's supposed to be this way, if that makes sense.
What happened?
Well, I did a podcast earlier in person with one of my actors from Thanksgiving Again, which is a movie that's coming out November 1st. By the time this episode comes out, I hope everyone listening has already watched the movie. But that all being said, things went to a deeper place than I thought it would, and just he and I was the director and actor, and he was an actor in a comedy movie. So things were always relatively light, and things went a little deeper than I thought they would. And I'm like, it's a good like I don't want to say preparation, but I'm like, I think today's just going to be a day where there's a lot of introspection, you
Just have
know?
a heavy day ahead of you. Yeah. So
Yeah,
cool.
I think so. But sometimes you need those, and sometimes it's good to have one of those days where you get to self-examine, right?
Yeah, I think those are good touch ups to have every once in a while, especially when they aren't expected. And I mean, I think that signals some self awareness, which I think people could use more of, or a lot of people could use more of. But it's just, I don't know. It's weird how things kind of work out like that.
Yeah. It sometimes I think it's the universe working to try to, or God or whatever, just trying to work to be like, you need to dig into this. So you're going to dig in hard today.
Yeah.
And that's good. So, I know the listener, probably doesn't know, a little bit about your story. So let's walk down that road a little bit. I guess maybe start from the beginning. I know you were in the Marines, correct?
Yeah. And there's, as you're aware of, and they are, yeah, because there's so many rabbit holes this can go down. Like if you need to shut me up and we'll go wherever you want to go. But so I was in the Marines for 4 years. I enlisted straight out of high school. So that was back in 2014. I was
Mm,
a machine gunner and was in for 4 years, deployed twice, but am not a combat vet. Both of my deployments were into the Pacific, but I ended up in a really bad place by the time that I got out from a combination of those personal circumstances, a traumatic brain injury from a motorcycle accident, and probably some pride in feeling that speaking up was weak. So instead of speaking up, I self-medicated with alcohol over the period of about a year. But what had happened was on my second deployment in late 2017, I found out that my wife was cheating on me. And
mm.
then which I found out from the other guy's wife. So that was really fun. I didn't
Ooh.
even find out from my wife, but I came back from that deployment, tried to make things work, and it didn't because all the trust was gone. So in January of 2018, I filed for divorce. We went our separate ways, and I was just keeping myself very busy at that point in time. Like that's how life is as a machine gunner in general. But when we weren't out in the field, I really leaned into the gym and running and also taking my dirt bike to the racetrack on the weekends. And in March of 2018, I was on one of those weekends with my motorcycle. I was in a nasty motorcycle accident and things changed for me. I became very agitated and impulsive. I became very I guess that was the first time that I've ever struggled with depression in my life, and I couldn't sleep. And I found that a drink or two before bed would help me sleep. And as those types of behaviors tend to, that progressed over time. So I was honorably discharged in August of 2018, and I can pause there if you want, since you wanted to hear the beginning, and that's kind of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. All that is a lot to go through. I mean, and what did so the you made the point that you were not in combat, but still being deployed and away from your wife is probably the reason that there was cheating going on. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a toll, like, because I was like, I wonder if there's PTSD type stuff, which I mean, from what I've heard about boot camp and whatnot, there still could be PTSD type stuff, I feel like. But like it's not the most encouraging environment, which is, not. I don't know that there's. I don't. Again, I'm speaking out of school here. I don't know that there's a better way to train soldiers, but God, it seems like not one that I would thrive under.
It's yeah, it's looking back, boot camp wasn't shit compared to getting to a grunt unit and being a boot in a grunt unit. That sucked. But I think people saying that they have PTSD from boot camp would be a bit of a stretch. Obviously, there are anomalies that happen, but I mean, for you to have PTSD, your life has to have been at risk. It is trauma that comes from that, or having experienced sexual trauma. You shouldn't be experiencing sexual trauma in boot camp. And it's the most stress that most 18-year-olds have been through, including myself. That was the most stress that I had ever been through. But like, it's a controlled environment. So, but I do think what you said about the cheating, some of that coming from the deployment. Yes, I was not in combat. I can't imagine what it's like to have been in combat, but you're gone, and it's not like you're just across the world. You're also out of touch for large stretches of time during that. And so our communication was not good. I was 20 at the time. I think maybe 20. No, I was 21 by the time that I deployed. And so our communication already wasn't good. Then you inject the distance into that equation. And I think that's really where all of that kind of came from. And it's not like it doesn't condone the acts, but I do think that's what opened the door and kind of set the stage for it.
Right. And you both were kids, right? I mean,
yes.
So it's different if you were deployed as a 40-year-old who's been married for 10, 20 years, as opposed to being like 21 years old. Like, then,
and that was my first serious relationship. Like, we had dated in high school and then broke up, and then we got back together once I was in the Marines. And so I didn't know how to be a good husband. I realistically didn't know how to be a good boyfriend, because I hadn't had enough failed relationships, like learn the hard way of, well, I kind of suck at this, and neither one of us did. And that's why our communication sucked, because we were kids. And it's interesting though. You might've heard this on here. I know you've done a shitload of these things.
Yeah.
It's the military really, it's not intentional, but it is structured in a way that really pushes people towards marriage before they are ready for it, because of the marital benefits that you get. So I think I was an E4, so I was a corporal when we got married. I was getting about $800 every 2 weeks at that point as a single corporal. When we got married, I think my paychecks went up to $2,200 a month.
Wow.
Or $2,200 every 2 weeks. And then she gets all the medical benefits and everything else that come with being a spouse and a dependent. And, that wasn't I wanted to marry her. I had proposed, but we got married before I deployed in a courthouse wedding instead of waiting for a real wedding when I got back, so that she would be set up with those benefits. That kind of stuff happens all the time. And on top of that, a lot of those marriages do come from purely out of a monetary incentive, where it's like, yeah, well, what's the worst that happens? We'll get divorced, kind of thing. In the meantime, I'm going to be racking in a bunch of extra dough. So that stuff is I think that contributes to a lot of the failed marriages as well.
That's interesting, because I know my adopted grandfather. He went, I don't remember which war it was, maybe World War II. He was a Marine, and he proposed and got married to his, not even high school sweetheart, as I understand it, like a good friend of his.
Yeah.
And they got married, and they stayed married until they both died.
Wow.
They hated each other.
So they shouldn't have been. Yeah.
But his explanation to me, when I, was older, was I thought I was going to go over and die in the war because, back then most people did.
Yeah.
Or not most, but a lot, the odds were it was a coin flip whether you would come back alive. And she would get all these benefits if I died. So
Yes.
she was a good friend and we got married. And then they obviously were, they're Catholic, so they didn't get divorced and all of that. But I'm like, it's such a miserable marriage. He's like, right. But there was so much to gain for her if I die. And if I died single, no one gains anything. I just die. Um, and I know I don't know the details, but I had an uncle who was in kind of a similar situation to yours, where he went and got, I think, what they used to call a Dear John letter.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, where it's like I've been cheating on you since you've been gone and it's like, man, it's such a you don't really hear about it. So that's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up because I had not heard that about kind of the financial benefit too of just being more money. But it makes sense, and I don't know. I feel like and again, you tell me if I'm wrong. I feel like the whole process of getting into the military, part of it is to kind of dehumanize you. Like, dehumanize is maybe a strong word, but you're part of the collective. You're not, so getting married that's what you're supposed to do. I don't know. It seems it's a very unique profession.
It is, but it's I think there's a lot of and this is not me chastising. We're just talking about it. So the there's a lot of lumping in that happens when people without either direct military experience or familial military experience. Like I was a military brat, so I've always kind of known that life, and most of the men in my family have been military. So I know, I've always had more insight into how it actually works, but like in this, for example, in that, like going into the Air Force or the Space Force or the Coast Guard is going to be very different than going into the Marines. So
Yeah.
very different boot camp processes, very different cultures. Even within the Marines, it is a night and day difference between the combat centric units and the support types of units. An infantry unit is a very different kind of culture than a non-infantry unit. And so you get, first of all, the vast majority of people in the military are not in combat roles. So there's that, again, the Marine Corps boot camp experience definitely tries to strip you of individuality. That is like that is in the entire time that you were there until you've earned the title Marine, you speak in the third person. It is this recruit. There's no I, there's no me. And you will get fucked up if you don't speak in the third person. So like there is that, and that is part of that process. But like once you're in the military and you're outside of boot camp, it's not that way. There's definitely, yes, you are part of the larger whole, but it's not like you're stripped of personality outside of that context. And I don't know that that's how, I don't know at all if that's how the other branches boot camps are. I know that they are not as long and they aren't supposed to be as intense, but yeah, it's just, that's the very same thing as I've had family members while I'd been in the Marines for maybe like 2 years. And this was a conversation I had with an aunt and uncle, my blood aunt, uncle by marriage. The uncle had a nephew, like blood nephew, who wanted to go into the Marines to join the Marine Corps band. They thought he would be going to war. They thought that he would be subjected to all the same kind of stuff that they would hear me talking about of my experience for the first year and a half in the fleet as a boot in a grunt unit. Like it is, again, night and day different experiences there. And so I think I'm just trying to paint that larger picture for you, and I guess kind of drill into what you said there. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I love that. And I before we dive deeper into your story, one of the memories that my childhood, I mentioned my adopted grandfather, who my two natural grandfathers were dead before I was born. So
Okay.
my grandpa Pat was the only grandfather I knew growing up. And he took me every year. We did the Marine Corps and the Postal Service worked on a Toys for Tots drive.
Yeah.
So I would go with him as like God, I don't even know how old I was, 9, 10, 11. I'd go to the base, and me and him and a couple Marines would drive around in a big military, I don't know, car. We'd just load the toys into the thing, and I was a little kid, and they were recruiting me way too hard. But
Yeah. Yeah.
aside from that, I loved one of the times it was the Army Navy game weekend in December, and the way they talk trash, obviously they were rooting for Navy because the Marines are a branch of the Navy or something. I still don't
Department of the Navy. Yeah.
Yeah. But the way they talk trash about people who were not Marine Corps in the military just killed me as a little kid. Like, it was just like, and then they make fun of the Army and the Navy, and then the Air Force would come up and everyone would just die laughing.
Yes, it's like when the Air Force is around, then all hats are off on our beef, and it's all in fun, and that's why like even when veterans get around other veterans, like that jabbing is still part of it, but that's like that shit talking is like part of our love language. Like it's all fun, and now the Air Force has the Space Force to shit on, so that's good for everybody.
Yeah, and they can all shit on the Coast Guard.
Yeah, I don't know about the Space Force. They're
yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Bottom rung at this point, but yeah.
So getting back to your story, the motorcycle accident, the drinking, I can relate to the needing some drinks to go to sleep, and that can be its own little tricky spiral to go down. How did things, I guess not to give away the story, but how did things unravel from there?
Oh, they did. They unraveled hard. So,
Yeah, right.
and this is just what I'm about to tell you is just the first unraveling. There were some unraveling that happened in recovery from all this, but so that motorcycle accident was in March of 2018. I was honorably discharged in August, and the drinking progressed over that period. But then I came home to Colorado and started going to college and working. I wanted to be an ER nurse, so that's what I was pursuing, and I started working at a local hospital. I kept getting into a worse and worse place, specifically because I wouldn't talk about the stuff that I was struggling with. And again, no combat. This was all just stuff. Specifically, I could not escape everything that had gone wrong with my wife. It was just, if I had idle time and hadn't fully exhausted myself, as soon as I sat down and didn't have something distracting me, that stuff would replay in my head of like, okay, I'm a fuck up as a husband, whatever. What did I do wrong there? Now I'm not a Marine, and all this. Just it's rumination is what it is. But so that drinking progressed. I kept getting into a worse and worse place because I wasn't speaking up, and also leaned harder and harder into putting on the facade that I was doing all right. So that looked like, as I became increasingly apathetic to everything that I loved, whether that was the gym or the motorcycles and snowboarding and stuff like that, the only thing I was really consistently showing up for was work, school, the gym, and drinking. Everything else was even that stuff, not the drinking, but the gym, work, and school was kind of at the point where I was having to force myself through everything. But I was trying to force myself out of the house because I saw that I was getting into a worse spot, but to do the things that I loved because I thought it would help. And, I'd load all my snowboarding gear up, drive 2.5 hours up to the mountains, get there and be like, man, I still don't want to be here. And I'd just sit in my truck for a couple hours before I drove home so that it looked like I went snowboarding. Did the same thing with my dirt bike moving into that spring, and just kept getting into a worse spot. That continued all the way into March of 2019, a year after the motorcycle accident. And on March 27th, I decided that I was going to kill myself. I was totally sober. It's the first time in my life I've ever mishandled a firearm, but I cleared it out and held it to my head and knew that I was going to kill myself. I didn't know when, but I honestly felt relief in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Some spidey senses should have been going off for me, but I was in such a bad spot. And I think this is important to talk about because by the time that someone has reached the point of wanting to die, they are no longer in a sane state of mind when you think that that is the answer. And that is a symptom of pure despair. That is you believing that whatever that spot that you're in is inescapable. And it's so silly now because all the things that I've been through since and gotten past in through learning the tools on how to do so. Like I've seen that was a lie but I believed it. And I think most people who reach that point and do go through with it probably feel the same way. So again, I was totally sober that night. March 30th, my parents came over and were checking out my new apartment because they had just kicked me out of the house. I don't know, I think in January. And then on March 31st, so the next day, because when my parents were at my house with my little sisters, again, I acted like nothing was wrong. On March 31st, I was actually in the middle of recording a suicide video to my family because I thought that was more personal than writing a note. And finally explaining myself and where I was at for the first time and where all of these behaviors were coming from, not justifying my actions, but just like, painting the picture of where I was at. And my roommate came home early from work and interrupted me recording that video. I paused it, went out into the kitchen and talked to him like nothing was wrong and asked how his day was, and then went back in my room and shot myself. Right between the eyes. And so I'm now completely blind and deaf in one ear. I had to have my face reconstructed and a bunch of other stuff.
Oh, that's yeah. And a lot of that I don't think the average person understands. And unfortunately I do. You said it beautifully. It's temporary insanity is really what it is. It's just the person I was telling you who's sitting here next to me is the most positive, happy person one of the top 5 happiest, most positive people I've ever been around in my life. And, he revealed to me that he was suicidal earlier this year. And I told him I was literally 2 months ago about to do it. And luckily, I've been through it a couple times where I have what I refer to as my safety net, where it's just like I shoot up the bat signal, and if someone responds, they'll be able to save me. Like I know it's insanity, and I just need someone to know where I am at that moment. And it's really hard to. Most people, fortunately, don't go through that, right? Like they don't ever. They're not ever at the place where they just think. Because most people I've talked to are like, it's such a selfish thing to do. And I'm like, not in that moment.
I used to think that too.
Yeah. And I do, from a bird's eye view, it is a selfish thing, sure. But in the moment, in your mind, in my mind, when you're there, you think you're actually helping the people you love by killing yourself. Like the way I described it was like I felt like I was a burden to everyone. Like I've got kids, my parents, my siblings, my friends. I'm a burden to them. Without me weighing them down, think of how much better their lives will be. And it's insanity. It really is. There's no other way to describe it, because once you get past it, But the other thing that struck me with your story, which I had never heard this term before, and I don't know if you have, but Sean, the guy I was talking to, was like, I had toxic positivity, where I would always, like you said, you went and you talked to your roommate, asked him how his day was, and he probably thought you were in a good mood and you were happy and healthy and all that, and then you went and shot yourself. Um, and it's putting on the facade of being happy. Um, and I think the beauty of guys like us having this conversation is hopefully, like, it's not, I mean, it's luckily not a large percentage of people have these kind of thoughts, but it's not abnormal. It's to have these thoughts. You need to vocalize it. You can't hide behind, you can't hide behind a shield and be like, everything's okay. And then I don't know. It's
Yeah.
really sad to yeah.
Yeah, statistically, maybe looking at a large picture, is what percentage of the population deals with it. It's not that common, but it is way more common than you would think,
Mm-hmm.
especially, because I wear it. Like I get asked the question of the blindness comes up all the time if people don't already know my story, and I'm very open about it. So I tell them, and I would say more often than not, people have either dealt with it directly or know someone who has, whether that's
Yeah.
they lost someone or know someone who has lost someone. It is so much more common, and it's hard for people to understand. I think because of the maybe not recognizing or not being able to grasp the insanity side of it, where that sounds ridiculous if you've never dealt with depression like I hadn't until a year before that.
Yeah.
You have to realize that, or stop and consider it from the perspective of we are our own biological and instinctual coding that is in our genes, and really for any biological organism on this earth. Like, it comes, everything that we do is either in service of self-preservation or forwarding our genes. Like, at the most basic level, that is what living things do on this earth.
Yeah.
Killing yourself flies in the face of both of those. Those are our most
Yes.
our most basic instincts and things that we are intended to do, and that countless generations of humans have performed those behaviors to make it possible for us to be here. That's insanity outside of everything else, and it's not even as. And I was sober the night that I decided I was going to kill myself. I was not sober when I shot myself. I had some drinks trying to build up some liquid courage to shoot myself. And probably some of that was also having to talk about it, like, for that video. It's like how much I think that's also a lot of the equation with these things and people getting or going through with it. Like, I do think I would have gone through with it because I decided when I was sober that I was going to, but I don't know that. Maybe I wouldn't have. Maybe I would have had that moment of clarity that you've had where you do reach out to people. And it's crazy because that you sending up the bat signal, you reaching out to someone, even if it's not, doesn't have to be a professional. If you don't have a friend or someone close to you that you trust, you can also just call the crisis line. I've called them once since losing my sight because things got a whole lot worse for me. I'm sure we'll get into this later on in my story, but post blindness, like there's been a lot of nastiness, and I've called that number once. They will get you connected with the services that there are so many people out there that want to help you. And that act of saying it when just looking at it on paper is very simple, but however, it is extremely difficult to do. But I do think, like you talking about that is so important for people to hear, because that is all that is all it takes. There are so many people out there who want to help you and will, but people have to know that you're struggling to do that. That's all. And I'm sure, when I finally faced my depression, sometime later, again, I'm sure we'll get into this, but when I finally did and I spoke up at a point when I was suicidal later on, like that was the hardest thing that I've ever done. And I'm sure for you, like you learned that somewhere to actually speak up. Obviously, I don't think most people do. So like, where did you get that from?
Um, so it's interesting. I when in 2020, I came very, very close to committing suicide, and I sent out instead of doing a video, I sent like a cryptic text message to my family. And literally, I was leaving my phone downstairs to walk upstairs and slip my wrists in the bathtub. Like that was the plan. It was the easiest cleanup, I thought. I was trying to be considerate on my way out. And my phone rang as I was going upstairs, literally knife in hand. I'd already tested to make sure it was sharp enough to cut. Like it was a done deal. But I'm like, oh, who's calling? And it was my mom. And my message was cryptic enough that it warranted her calling me. And that phone conversation went on a while. And in essence, my brain said, I will break her if I do this. So I'll wait till next week. So, I can't do it right after this, or I'll break her soul. So I'll do it next week. And over the next week, of course, the sanity came back, and it was like, oh, that seems stupid. Why would I do that? This is not none of the. And then, so I went back to the fact that I sent a text message, and one of the things that uh, a lot of people do, and I heard Eric Kramer was a former NFL quarterback who shot himself in the head and survived as well. And he only survived because he sent a similar cryptic text message. And so he shot himself, didn't die, and the paramedics were there because people, figured out where he was and realized this is not normal, and he was not answering his phone. And he only lived, he didn't bleed out because the paramedics arrived fast enough to save him. And so that's where the biological impulse of staying alive is so strong, where a lot of people do just be like, there's just something in them that's like, I just gonna send this before I die. I'm gonna, and the intent's not to survive, but I feel like it's inherent that maybe So that's where I said, at that point, I need to be open about having these bad thoughts because I can save myself.
Yeah.
And all I did a couple months ago when I was, again, ready to do it, I was convinced. All I did was I went on Facebook and said I could really use a safety net right now. And I had 2 people call me within 10 minutes. And it was like, well, I deleted the post immediately because I probably would have had 20 people call me over the next 24 hours. And that to me was enough of like, well, it worked. The safety net worked.
Can I
Please.
bring up something that's probably going to be uncomfortable here?
Yeah.
I realize how this might sound to you or people listening, but this might sound abrasive. It is not supposed to be. This is something that I think is very important to talk about, and I do talk about it a lot. It's something when I've posed to I almost said other mental health professionals. I'm not a mental health professional. When I've posed it to mental health professionals, clinicians, whatever, I haven't gotten any pushback on it. I think it's not talked about because it doesn't sound very charitable, and it sounds a little, I think it probably, or at least there's the belief that it will not sound great coming from someone who's been through it. And I realize, obviously, I'm qualifying what I'm about to say because I realize how it sounds even coming from me. But I think that's because this is such a sensitive subject and there's so much into it. But, I think there are two different populations in this, in the sense that, so the warning signs that we're taught, right, as a society, are generally overt warning signs, like what you've expressed with sending a cryptic text or making a cryptic Facebook post. Everyone knows when they see those things, this person is struggling, and that is a cry for help. I think there's, and then, so I think that population, and I'm curious to hear what you think with this, like, both populations need the same amount of help. It is still a crisis. It is the exact same thing, but it presents very differently. I think there is the population who do show those overt signs, like you did with the text, even though it may have come in the last little bit. You sending that text, it is a cry for help before you went through with it.
Yeah.
And then there's the other side where I hid it until the last seconds before I went back in my room and shot myself. And I think that, that you hear about people all the time. Yes, some on one hand, there was the population who does make the overt warning signs. Obviously, Eric Kramer is an exception to the fact that he did the text and then went through and shot himself. I still think that was a cry for help.
It was, yeah.
And then, like me hiding it until the very last second, I just think that's important to recognize, because those warning signs that we talk about don't encapsulate. There's what portion of the population. It's not like I'm the only one who hides it until the last minute and hides it all the way through the very end. Like, I just think that needs to be discussed more, because recognizing and stepping in, there's no obvious signal there to pick up in that population. I bring all of that up because I think, that's a lot of times people ask about the warning signs, and I kind of think they're bullshit because they miss this other half of the population. And the way to intervene in these things, and that, I guess, really in all populations, but especially in the people who are going and trying to hide it, like those, if you stop and look at my story, there still were indicators that something was wrong. Not that I was suicidal, but that I was not headed in the right direction. But you have to know a person really, really well to be able to notice those changes in baseline, and then also have the very uncomfortable conversation of, hey, Jeff, man, I wanted to call you, or, I need to pull you aside so we can talk about something. I've noticed you've been drinking a lot lately. You've been very short with me. This is out of character for you, and I'm noticing you pulling away from X and Y things. I'm worried about you. Are you planning on killing yourself?
Well, so that's what I love the distinction between that, because I think what I would love is for people who want to hide it until it's done, is to feel comfortable enough when they are sane. Like, I mean, I don't know, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like most people who are suicidal, it's not a spur of a moment. There is a little build up to it. And being comfortable being like, you know what? I know while I'm still sane, this is not a good idea, even though it may seem like the best solution to what I'm going through. And to protect myself, I'm going to tell people that's kind of my philosophy of it. Is more of, just send, again, the Eric Kramer cry for help. He still did it. Yeah. I sent the cry for help. If my mom didn't call, I would have done it. Who know? I'm not experienced with slitting my wrist, but who knows what would have happened? I presumably have superhuman abilities, as do you, obviously, getting shot in the face. Well,
now,
by the way, they reconstructed your face very well. I know you can't see it, but there's no you wouldn't guess that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Now if my bullet or if my forehead wasn't technically bulletproof after having survived that, it literally is now because now it's titanium. So it's pretty cool. I got an upgrade. But,
That's self-preservation right there. Just
yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
damn it.
I don't know, man. I just, I was curious because like, I think that's not something I don't think I've ever in a format like this been able to discuss that with someone who was at that point and did take the other route of maybe subconsciously letting someone know that they were struggling. So I was just curious, like if you've thought about that, and because I think that is important
Yeah.
for people to recognize, specifically in the interest of. I don't think we will ever fully eliminate suicide, but we can definitely be better at intervening and improve the rates at which we do intervene, like in the ways that we've kind of already touched on. But yeah,
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think a lot of it is, even though I was going to say destigmatize it, but that sounds like such a
it's like
bullshit
a
thing to
co-opted
say.
thing at this point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. But it's like it's hard for I look, you were a Marine. I'm 6'2", 250 pounds. Like I'm a big guy. So showing weakness is not something that men like to do. It's just, it's
like
men
goes
like to
against something
be
in us. Yeah,
yeah. We're broken inherently somewhere inside of us. And it's like but it's okay. Like we're all human, but so yes, I do think I have actually considered the difference between the people who hide it all the way until they're dead, in essence. And thank God that you're not. But I have considered the difference between the two people the ones who cry for help and the ones who don't. And I would like to make more people who do cry. Like,
yeah,
that's kind of my thought of this whole thing is like, go ahead, ask for help. Like, you know, it's okay. It's
yeah.
okay. But you have to have that revelation while you're still sane, which is again sometimes a tricky point. And I'm glad by the way, the temporary insanity thing, it's like, yeah, I know exactly what we're on the same page with that. It's like, oh man, that was stupid. But at the
And
time it made
temporary.
all
Yeah,
of the sense. It made all of the sense.
because it feels like the only potential for relief. I mean, that is again,
Yes.
it's pure desperation and despair. This is the only option is nothing I've tried, even though most of the stuff I was doing was maladaptive. Obviously, adding alcohol, adding a depressant into a depressive state is fueling the fire. In my mind, I was like, well, I've tried everything and this isn't, I've got one more thing I can try and I know it will end it, which is, it's, it's horrendous that we're even able to reach that point. I think that like that feels like faulty wiring for our brains to be able to reach that point. But that is it's reality. But that's why these conversations are powerful. It's just they're different. Whether most people listening probably can't relate directly to my story, and most people listening probably can't relate directly to yours. But
No.
laying it out like this leaves it available for people to take from it what they will, pull out the core nuggets of information and extrapolate that into their own circumstances. And like you said earlier, I think that vulnerability, I can't remember if that was before we started recording. I think it was, but you'd mentioned like that is, you believe that is the mechanism through which like these kind of things help people. And I wholeheartedly agree.
Hmm. Yeah, this I feel like this should be a two-parter. Because I do want to touch on before we exit, like obviously this was what, 6 years ago?
Yeah. 6.5.
6.5 years ago. And obviously you you have you've recovered, presumably, hopefully. I mean, uh,
Honestly, I think the story that came afterwards is much more important than, or at least just as important as what we've already talked about, because that was, I've been through worse things since, and I'm still here. And the things that I've achieved despite all of that, I think that is, we've laid the groundwork for what it's like to be in that hell. But I think the other
coming out
facet
the back
there
end of
is
it.
showing the back end and what's possible despite all of the other shit that's been thrown on. So
Yeah.
yeah,
To gosh, half of me is like, maybe we should do a part two on the back end. just just because I'm like, oh man, this could be great. I don't know if you want to do that. If you want to come back another time to tell the back end of it, it's up to you.
could we just knock it out now and you split it into two?
Potentially, just time concerns.
Okay.
But yeah, let's dive in. I mean, you have to
Well,
live every day. I mean, this is the I'm saying this in a way that's rude, I realize.
no,
I'm
you're
not
good.
intending it that way, but you have to live every day with the consequence of your temporary insanity.
Yeah.
What so I imagine that weighed heavily
Time
into
constraint wise, what do you have here? Like, what do we have to work with?
like 15.
Okay. Yeah. So I can give you the quick rundown, I guess. Hmm. Yes. So I've had to live with the effects of all of this. When they took me off of life support, I had to relearn how to do everything. At first, I couldn't sit up in bed. I relearned how to feed myself and brush my teeth and walk and all that stuff.
Mm.
And 8.5 months later, I was snowboarding again. A month after that, I was back in college. And 6 months after that, in the middle of 2020, I was back out on my own. And it wasn't until all of that, and at the end of 2020, I bought my first house, and the pace of life had finally settled. I didn't have doctor's appointments every day anymore. I was back in college. I was doing things on my own. And that's when I finally saw like how, I mean, life, it was bad. There was life. It was hard. It was very hard. Everything took me forever to do. Most of the digital things that I needed access to weren't accessible to me, even though I'd learned the skills to use a talking computer and phone and all that stuff. And was burning all my meals and getting lost in downtown Denver, trying to be independent with my cane and things like that. And
Mm.
that's when I really, really finally started to struggle. And I reached the point where I was suicidal. And that's what I was talking about, and it didn't make sense again, but depression is not rational
Right.
by all wickets. If you were down the checklist of things, you're like, this dude's kicking ass. He's like, a year and a half ago, he was so messed up from his brain injury. He didn't even know he was blind. Now he's done all these things. And I was skiing and rock climbing and competing in Brazilian jiu-jitsu against people without disabilities at that point. But I struggled. And that was the first time that I ever spoke up with my depression. And because I knew that if I didn't, I was going to die. And it took several months. And I went from, talking to my therapist once a week to every day for several months there, where I did get through it. And that taught me a very important lesson. I needed that, because that is what showed me that inescapable, or that the idea of those mental states being inescapable is a lie. And later that year, my college stopped making my course content accessible to me, which they are legally obligated to do, but they stopped. And all of a sudden I wasn't able to be independent in that realm either. And I really, really struggled with that because of all the things that I was capable of at that point. And I was fully independent again until someone else dropped the ball and stopped doing their job. So,
Mm.
but I started researching what caused all that, how come I could do my psychology homework, but not my math homework? How come I could pay my mortgage, but not my electric bill, and whatever the case was. I found out that it all came down to the code running behind the scenes of each app or website every piece of software that I was utilizing. That software developers could take specific intentional steps to make things accessible. And most don't, because it takes a little extra work and they probably don't see the need for it. So I dropped out of college in October of 2021 to become part of the solution because most software is inaccessible. And I started teaching myself how to code. So, but at the same time, I picked up booze again, not having realized that I was definitely a functional alcoholic by the time that I shot myself. And that kicked off 2.5 years of rampant alcoholism, where I was either like, yes, I was still going to the gym and stuff like that, but primarily my full-time job was teaching myself how to code. And my other full-time job was being a degenerate drunk. So
Can I ask, being blind, coding, I guess I don't know anything about coding, but it seems like from everything I've seen, it would be a difficult, I guess, I don't know. That's probably a stupid question.
It is difficult. And
it's difficult when you're not blind.
Yeah. And a lot of it was, so I taught myself from reading articles online and trial and error. So a lot of the articles I was finding weren't accessible. A lot of the documentation for these programming languages weren't accessible. Then the tools that you have to write code in, a lot of them have accessibility issues. But I was stubborn about it. And so I kept pushing and drinking. I mean, the drinking got worse than it ever had been before. Like I would code basically until the point that I was too incoherent to be able to think through the logic required to code or type real words. And then I would pass out in random places. Sometimes I would wander across Denver, blackout drunk, and all sorts of other shit that I'm lucky didn't kill me. But
as a blind person, I feel like it's a bad
move, not just from the perspective of getting hit by a car, but also someone deciding, all right, there's a drunk blind dude here, that there couldn't be an easier target to mug. Like I'm very lucky to still be here, but when the drinking got so bad that it was very clear that I needed help, because I couldn't make it more than a couple days of being sober. And when I did drink, it was 2 or 3 days of just straight blackout the whole time. I do realize the irony of that because I'm blind, but so I tried AA, I tried outpatient rehab, and then I went to an inpatient rehab facility. I got diagnosed with an incurable, deadly genetic disease called Huntington's disease while I was at rehab. So when I came home, when I came home, which the coolest part about that disease is that as it progresses, the end stage is that you are a vegetable until you die from, either your brain tissue deteriorating more or pneumonia or whatever you get. So my drinking got worse than it ever had been when I came back from rehab. But that whole time I kept teaching myself how to code. So I would make it 2 or 3 days of recovering in between drinking sessions, which was mostly because I was hungover for 2 or 3 days. I would do those binges all over again. And then it was a constant process, but I kept teaching myself how to code. And in 2023, I started my first company. I released my first piece of software, it was just a word puzzle game, but it looked and functioned normally for people without disabilities. Like, you never would have known that there was anything special about it, but it was also accessible to virtually every physical disability. And that all happened automatically, inferring from information on users' devices. So whether you were low vision and needed magnification, or to use high contrast colors or decrease the amount of animations on screen so your shitty eyes could track what was going on, or you're totally blind and need your screen reader to read it aloud, or you were totally blind and totally deaf and you needed to use it with Braille, or you're paralyzed or have no arms and need to use it with their voice. Everybody could use it. And people started reaching out to me and telling me the impact that it was having on them. That had an impact on me, seeing that I was finally doing something and putting something into the world that was helping people. You have to realize I know that sounds crazy because it is a word game, but if you think back to the level of challenge that people are constantly having to jump throughout every single day when you have a serious disability like that. Like having some normalcy there is big, and not having to jump through hoops is big. And at the end of the year, it wound up, I guess, I started getting those messages. I made it a month sober, then I fell off the wagon. Then I made it 2.5 months sober, then I fell off the wagon. And I had my last drink on December 5th of 2023. And then at the end of the year, that game won 2 Game of the Year awards for all of those accessibility approaches that I had taken. And
Awesome.
it's just kind of rolled through to where I wrote the first draft of my book last year. I'm now working through the 4th draft. I've taken those approaches because that app was a proof of concept for me that I could make sure that I could handle the entire process, including the visuals as a solo developer, so that I could bring these things to market and hopefully grow a company off of them entirely by myself, at least in the beginning stages, to get the initial ideas out there. So I've been working on something for the past 1.5 years that I hope will have a much larger impact on. Again, it will be stuff that everyone can use, but the real impact there is on the impact that it has in terms of access for people with disabilities. And it just, things have been rolling forward from there. I'm hoping all that stuff will be out in about a year. And it's been this cool thing where I've gone down a path that I never would have wound up in. Obviously, doing mental health work is a lot of this, and sharing my story and stuff like this, and a lot of public speaking, sharing my story. And because I have the same belief that you do, that these kinds of conversations, like, it's in this rawness and really delving into the uncomfortable stuff where people, that is what will have an impact on people. And so I have, my podcast is very varied. It is very broad, but we do get into some of these conversations, and they do come up a lot in places that you wouldn't expect because of my own background. It's been an interesting kind of dynamic where people will open up, and it's just, it's all in the hopes of doing the same thing that you're doing and trying to keep other people from making that decision of insanity.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. Like, your story is incredible, and congratulations on the accomplishments, by the way.
Thanks, man.
I don't want to let that go unsaid, but it's inspirational and hopefully educational, or I don't know, something to people listening. I mean, I have mostly male listenership, so
Sausage fist.
Hey, right. And but I feel like a lot of this is more ingrained in men. The the strong silent, type. Zach, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's amazing, and I feel like a year from now, when some more stuff's out, you should definitely come back on, man. But tell my audience where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm kind of everywhere. I would say the big place, my website, it's zachtidwell.com, is where you can reach out. And if you want me to come speak somewhere, it's a good spot. I'm on all the socials. I guess not TikTok. I don't do a lot of Instagram. Not being able to see, that's kind of a barrier. So, but it's a visual format. But I have an Instagram account that's got some stuff from pre-blindness and all that. I'll have stuff going on. And then my podcast is called Going In Blind with Zach Tidwell. It's not blindness related. That is just a play on words. But yeah, kind of everywhere.
And all the links will be in the show notes below. Zach, thanks so much for coming on again. I think this was something I needed today. The whole day was kind of leading to this. So I appreciate you, and I'm glad you're still here, and I'm glad I'm still here. And let's both be here a year from now, and let's do it again. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be here, so I challenge you to be here. But I appreciate you letting me grill you.
Anything.
You better fucking guarantee it. Sorry I pulled you more into the heaviness of the day, but I felt like once you offered that up, that was something that needed to be asked about because people need to hear it.
No, brother, this was great. This is what I needed. I appreciate it. All
Awesome,
right.
man. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it. That's all. Hope you had a ball or whatever's appropriate for for this one. Thank you, Zach, for coming on, sharing your story. That was, hopefully it reaches one person. Well, I know more than one person will listen, but hopefully it reaches one person who needs to hear it. Uh, have a plan for when those demons pop up in your life. Boom, it's over. Thanks for listening.
It was amazing. I loved it.
Be sure to come back for another great episode
I'm one wing away from Jeff Macolino.
of the Jeff Macolino Podcast.
How much time did you spend on thinking of the name of your podcast? You went just straight, that's my name, I'll add the word podcast to it.
Yup. See you next week.